We begin lectures for MA students in text analysis. The aim of the course is to acquaint students with a variety of methods and tools for the analysis of written text and provide them with the practical skills required for their application. The course contains both theoretical and practical moments. It begins with an introduction to the major theories of text and discourse, during which we will discuss the relationship between them. We will also review basic standards of textuality, the production and reception of text as a dynamic, contextualized interaction, focus on linguistic and cognitive peculiarities of the communicative development of the text from the perspective of the variable representation of reality. During the practical moments, students will concentrate on a particular aspect and tools of text analysis and apply them to empirical material collected by them. Thus, through lectures, seminars, and practical workshops, the course will equip students both with a comprehensive understanding of different functional semantic types of text, as well as with the necessary tools for their analysis. By the end of the course, students should be able to select appropriate tools to analyze texts of their choice for purposes of their choice. Our lectures are based on most widely used books in text linguistics and discourse analysis. Each lecture is provided by a list of references that will help you expand your knowledge on the given topic. The topic of lecture 1 is the notion of text and discourse. When we think of a text, we typically think of a stretch of language complete in itself and of some considerable extent, such as a business letter, a leaflet, a news report, a receipt, and so on. However, there appears to be a problem when we have to define units of language which consist of a single sentence, a phrase, or even a single word, which are all the same experienced as text because they fulfill the basic requirement of forming a meaningful whole in their own right. Typical examples of such small-scale text are public notices like keep off the grass, keep left, no smoking, danger, etc. Accordingly, there are two methodological approaches to the definition of the notion of text, structuralist and functionalist. The structuralist or descriptive methodology of linguistic analysis considers language as a system of signs which is organized by the principle of hierarchy of levels of its lingual units. The peculiarity of this hierarchy lies in the fact that units of any higher level are formed of the units of the immediately lower one. Thus, morphemes are formed of phonemes, words are formed of morphemes, and sentences are formed of words. But the sentence is not the highest unit of a language in the hierarchy of levels. Today, the highest level of lingual units is considered to be the textual level represented by a text. Traditionally, from the structural viewpoint, text is defined as a sequence of thematically interrelated sentences which forms a meaningful whole. For instance, in the text which represents a news report from Sunday Times, all the sentences are thematically interrelated under the headline false alarm. Let's read the text. False alarm. A 12-year-old boy got mad at his parents Friday night because they refused to let him go fishing on the Colorado River with relatives. So, While the parents were distracted during a barbecue with 8 adult friends, he slipped away from his sister and 3 brothers, snatched the keys to a Volkswagen Beetle, and drove off in one of his parents' 4 cars, prompting fears that he had been kidnapped. Cajun police sent teletype descriptions of the curly 90-pound 6th grader to law enforcement agencies throughout Southern California and the Arizona border area. The boy was found unharmed but scared and sleepy at about noon yesterday by San Diego County Sheriff's deputies. Textis, a communicative unit of the highest rank, carrying a complete piece of information. The informative potential of any text is determined by its ability to designate a whole space of reality built up by a number of target situations or events. According to the structural definition, the lower border of the text is restricted as it implies a sequence of at least 2 sentences, whereas its top border is open because of the varying diapason of its theme. On this basis, linguists differentiate structural types of text into microtext and macrotext. In microtext, sentences center around one concrete theme, whereas in macrotext, microtexts are united by hypertheme, which is derived from the constituent microseams. Our news report represents a macrotext generated under the headline False Alarm, which serves as the hypertheme of the text. It is formed of 4 microtexts, each having its own concrete theme around which the sentences are united. The theme of the first microtheme can be formulated as a 12-year-old boy mad at his parents. The second as the boy slips away in his parents' car. The third as the police takes measures to find the boy, and the last microtext can be formulated as the boy found unharmed. These 4 microthemes entail the evaluative generalization of the described events as false alarm, which serves both as the hypertheme and the headline of the text, generating the account of events under it. There also exists a notion of megatext. In literary text, the notion of megatext implies a cycle of thematically interrelated short stories, poems, or even novels of one author. For instance, John Goldsworthy's trilogy, The Forsyte Saga, represents a megatext because it consists of 3 novels, The Man of Property, In Chancery, and To Let, each describing a certain period of the Forsyte family. Similarly can be treated Theodore Dreiser's trilogy of Desire, which is composed of the novels The Financier, The Titan, and The Stoic, each of which describes a certain period of the remarkable life of the Chicago streetcar tycoon Charles Tyson Yates. But we have already indicated that there are texts which are built up by one sentence, a phrase, or even one single word. We have also pointed out that typical examples of such small-scale texts are public notices like keep out, ramp ahead, slow, exit, etc. It is obvious that these minimal texts are meaningful themselves, therefore do not need a particular structural patterning with other language units. In other words, they are complete in terms of communicative meaning. Such a functional approach to the essence of a text finds its explication and the functional definition of the text, according to which a verbal unit of any length, be it a sequence of semantically interrelated sentences, a sentence, a phrase, or even a single word, can be defined as a text if it performs a communicative function. So, there arises a question. If the meaningfulness of text does not depend on their size, what else does it depend on? Let's consider the road sign "Ramp ahead." When you're driving a car and you see this sign, you interpret it as a warning that there will be a small hump on the road ahead of you, and that it's therefore wise for you to slow down when you drive over it. From this, it follows that you recognize a piece of language as a text not because of its length, but because of its location in a particular context. And if you are familiar with the text in that context, you know what the message is intended to be. But now suppose you see the same road sign and the collection of a souvenir hunter. Of course, you still know the original meaning of the sign, but because of its dissociation from its original context of traffic control, you are no longer able to act on its original intention. Furthermore, prompted by its alien situational context, you might be tempted to think up some odd meaning for the otherwise similar sign, particularly when you see it in relation to other souvenirs in the collection. Needless to say that it was just exactly what the souvenir hunter wanted you to do. From this example of alienation of context, we can conclude that for the expression of its meaning, a text is dependent on its use in an appropriate context. Thus, we have come to the relationship between text and discourse. We may even go further and assert that the meaning of a text does not come into being until it is actively employed in a context of use. This process of activation of a text by relating it to a context of use is what the linguists call discourse. To put it differently, this contextualization of a text is actually the reader's or the hearer's reconstruction of the writer's or the speaker's intended message. That is, his or her communicative act or discourse. In these terms, the text is the observable product of the writer's or the speaker's discourse, which in its turn must be created as the process that has created it. Such an observation of a text is a matter of degree. For example, it may be in a written form, or in the form of sound recording, or it may be unrecorded speech. But in whatever form it comes, a reader or a hearer will search the text for cues and signals that may help to reconstruct the writer's or the speaker's discourse. However, just because he or she is engaged in a process of reconstruction, it is always possible that the reader or the hearer infers a different discourse from the text than the writer or the speaker had intended. Therefore, one might also say that the inference of discourse meaning is largely a matter of communication between the writer and the reader in a contextualized social interaction. So, we can suggest that a text can be realized by a piece of language as long as it is found to record a meaningful discourse, when it is related to a suitable context of use. As British scholar Michael Halliday writes, text is language in use. It implies that text is a speech product, whereas language exists as a system of virtual signs that represent building material for the text. In other words, language system provides the writer or the speaker with abstract models by which they convert their own ideas into a text. If we apply Saussure's antinomy language versus speech, text should be treated as speech entity since it is produced as a result of actualization of different units of language system in speech. Text, as a communicative lingual unit, has its peculiar characteristics. Textual characteristics are first of all predetermined by the whole set of such factors as the communicants, comprising both the writer or the speaker and the reader or hearer, the text with the help of which they interact, the place and time of the communication, the correspondence between the textual world and the objective world of reality, and so on. This means that while analyzing a text, we should focus on the features that completely differ from the lingual units proper. The set of all these and other similar non-linguistic characteristics has led to the development of pragmatics as an inseparable branch of communicative linguistics. At present, text linguistics and pragmatics represent two interdependent aspects of discourse analysis, be it written text or conversations. At this point, it will have become clear that in order to analyze a text as a discourse product, we have to explore two different sides of meaning. On the one hand, the text's intrinsic linguistic or formal properties, such as its grammar, vocabulary, stylistics, typography, and so on, and on the other hand, the extrinsic contextual factors which are taken to affect its linguistic meaning. These two interacting sides of meaning are the concern of two fields of study, semantics and pragmatics, since syntax studies the interrelation of lingual signs without regard to their meaning. Semantics studies the relation between the verbal signs and the entities to which they apply, while pragmatic studies the relation between the sign system and its human users. In other words, semantics is the study of formal meanings as they are encoded in the language of text, independent of writers or readers set in a particular context, whereas pragmatics is concerned with the language meaning in discourse, that is, when it is used in an appropriate context to achieve particular aims. So, it is pragmatics that allows humans into the analysis of texts. We should know that pragmatic meaning is not an alternative to semantic meaning, but rather complementary to it because it is inferred from the interplay of semantic meaning with the context. It should be noted that in linguistic literature, the term context is used in two meanings. First, as an external, non-linguistic context which draws us to ideas and experiences outside the text. And second, as an internal linguistic context built up by the language patterns inside the text, which is often referred to as co-text in text linguistics. The latter is a very complex notion, as it may include any number of text external features influencing its adequate interpretation via discourse. According to some scholars in philosophy of language, pragmatics should underlie any linguistic analysis, as it is an empirical discipline that applies the results of both various scientific researches and the verbal behavior of communicants. The advantage of studying text via pragmatics is that it necessarily involves the interpretation of people's intended meanings, their assumptions, their purposes or goals, as well as kinds of actions such as request, order, stating facts, etc., that they are performing in a particular context and how this context influences what is said. It requires a consideration of how people organize what they want to say in accordance with who they are addressing to, where, when, and under what circumstances. Pragmatic approach to text analysis also involves the study of how listeners or readers should make inferences about what is said in order to arrive at an interpretation of the speaker's or the writer's intended meaning. Inference being the listener's or the reader's use of additional background knowledge in order to make sense of what is not explicit in the text. In other words, this type of analysis explores how a great deal of information is implied in the text without its explication. However, pragmatic analysis of the text has its big disadvantage since it is connected with human factors, and because of it, they are extremely difficult to analyze in a consistent and objective way. With written text, some of the problems associated with spoken transcripts are absent. We do not have to interact with people all speaking at once. The writer usually has time to think about what to say and how to say it, and sentences are usually well formed in a way that the utterances of natural, spontaneous talk are not. Thus, in modern linguistics, text is considered as a discourse product, as a semiotic entity of the highest rank that can perform communicative function by building a meaningful whole that is able to transmit a complete piece of information. That's all for this lecture. Thank you for attention.